Hi, everyone. I am Nadya Sultanik, and just like Becca just gave me a very nice introduction, I am a software architect at Arcweb Technologies. So as a software architect at Arcweb, my job is to distill features and problems into technical problems and design a software architecture and solutions to accomplish these challenges. What does that really mean? Well, let's talk about a simple example where a client comes to me and says, I would like to have an application that allows users to book appointments with medical practitioners. Seems pretty reasonable. We all occasionally visit doctors and would like to do the very same as a consumer. It's my job to take that ask on a product side and develop a software architecture that accommodates the creation and the maintenance of user accounts, of appointment blocks, variety of users, and to do that in a way that will be secure and preserve private data about people's names and HIPAA data, for example. Then the architecture I design in conjunction with a user design team, as well as the product owners, will be given to a set of developers, and it will be their job to implement this vision. So that's my job as a software architect. Before joining Arcweb, I was a senior software engineer at Lockheed Martin's Advanced Technology Laboratories. If any of you are local, that's right here in Cherry Hill. And there I led and worked on advanced research initiatives, mostly focused in the defense applications for our military. I hold a master's in computer science, and my focus, my master's work, was to design mobile collaboration techniques that are effective in intellectual collaboration specifically. A little bit about Arcweb. Arcweb is a boutique software consulting firm here in Old City, located 3rd and Market roughly. We are focusing on premier digital transformation of products and ideas. We partner with customers to create custom enterprise software that's impactful and engaging digital products and experiences. So these are some of our customers for whom I personally have worked, not all of them, but some of them. And it is a very exciting place to be and work because there's so many different problems and challenges that you get exposed to and get to work. Okay, so that was a very brief introduction of myself, a little bit about Arcweb, which is where I work, and the projects we work, and what a software architect does. So let's dive in and talk about what a front-end framework is, right? So before discussing the top front-end frameworks and overviewing them, we need to understand what front-end frameworks are. Sorry, that's a mouthful. We need to know what the front end is, really. The front end of a website or application, desktop or otherwise, is the stuff that's visible to users on the website, and the graphics, the typography, the arrangement of these two add to the overall experience that is provided or afforded to the user. Front-end development includes building user-friendly interfaces and effectively presenting that information from the back end to a user. I'll briefly touch on the back end and what that is and where it fits in the overall architecture in a few slides. But if we look at a couple of different applications, right, we can all just think of a web app we went on. I know the previous talk reviewed quite a few widely used and available web apps. There are many duplicated features, right? Many have authentication, pages that render, the connected databases, they have profiles, you can create an account, log in, reset your password, all things like that. And as a software engineer by trade, right, if I am to work on front ends and if I have to develop these applications, I would, without a front end framework, imagine having to write all of that logic and all of the technical code that would undergird these features. I would, however, want to have lots of tools that are available for me to do that so that I can do it effectively and faster. And this is really the crux of what we're going to talk about with respect to front-end frameworks. So in a nutshell, a front-end framework is a platform or a tool, however you want to call it, used to build the front end of your web application. Some of the tasks it can and should be able to provide out of the box are management of AJAX requests, associating data with the DOM or the document object model elements, defining a file structure, and styling components on the website or the application. When we as engineers build applications, we want to format our code in certain ways that help us become more efficient and help other developers understand our code. It is perhaps one of the most challenging things in a developer's life is to transition from one project to another and to take over code bases that you did not design or necessarily develop, and then to continue maintain those code bases. So web frameworks help us achieve structure in our applications, and they give us additional features which we can add to them without too much extra work. They give us a place to start and allow us to focus on features that are specific and unique to our application rather than configuration details. We have to remember that code is read many more times than it's written. And it's also important when you're working with other developers that they know where the code for certain tasks is. They can come in and skim and really do just skim a code base and understand where certain tasks and certain features are being implemented, that there is conventions that are followed. So frameworks typically come with their own conventions for how code should be written and structured, and allows developers to transition their code bases to other teams without too much pain. So I'm not sure where everyone is in their career here and in their knowledge and understanding of software development. I just wanted to give a brief overview. The document object model is a cross-platform and language-independent interface that allows us to specify XML or HTML document in a tree structure, so we know where in the page a user is. And AJAX is a set of web development techniques that use various technologies to allow us to make requests that are asynchronous. So this is specifically very important. You know, as a user, you want to be able to go and click on a button and not have the rest of your web app freeze while some data is being retrieved. So that's where AJAX will come into play. Okay, in the olden days, not so olden because I remember when these were the days, how did web apps get built before these modern frameworks? Well, developer teams would use JavaScript, HTML, CSS styling to write pretty customized code and for feature development. And some of the issues that frequently arose were that there were a lot of bugs. Non-standard look and feel. It depended on whether, you know, your development team had a great designer with an eye for aesthetics and they really understood the project, that you would you would end up with a nice looking application, or it would be a little wonky. So, you know, having something that's reliable, maintained, bug-free, those are all the problems or the challenges that people face before the advent of modern frameworks. So those really, these statements underline why, they answer the why use a framework. A framework will here offer a standardized, prepackaged foundation that provides developers with a frequently updated code base. And as a result, you can be more confident that what you write using this framework is bug-free and supported across browsers and devices, especially with the advent of mobile devices, different brands, different operating systems, tablets, different modalities. You can also, in using a framework, and we'll touch base on, touch on this a little bit later in the talk, you get the benefit of having the documentation that is proofread and proven, reviewed, and support from a larger community. There's a huge number of developers who give up their time to both offer advice, and also contribute to the code bases for these frameworks. The frameworks, like I said, are frequently updated and improved. And so the community and their offerings help push the reliability, the performance, and style of code that developers, as they come up and start using them, can use. Alongside standardized, more efficient, reliable solutions, frameworks reduce the amount of code developers have to write. And they do a lot of the heavy lifting. You no longer, for most frameworks, have to structure and create your own AJAX requests down to the nitty-gritty. There is now libraries that come with the frameworks on top of them that you can just make requests, whereas in the olden days, wasn't quite like opening sockets, but it was more complex. Front-end frameworks and libraries encourage standard approach for a project, allowing multiple contributors to worry less about interpreting custom code and more about adhering to the standards. Different libraries and different frameworks are vary in their degree to how insistent they are that developers follow their patterns and their structure, and some are more opinionated than others. But then again, highly opinionated tools and structures make moving from one project to another simpler and they allow for less flexibility. Lastly, front-end frameworks can help your app perform more like a native or a mobile application by implementing and improving the performance of features such as client-side routing. This can reduce the time the user interaction takes as a result, reduce page refreshes, and allow for a potential smooth transitions, animations, and an overall look and feel of how your application appears to the user and what their perception of its usability is. It's just, in the end, going to provide for a more elegant experience, no matter how good of a developer you are, just because behind each framework is an army of developers working on it. I touched on this and said I would come back and talk about what the stack is. So my job is to architect the overall stack, and that includes architecting what the front end components are and the back end components are. So I'm going to talk about what this whole stack is and why it's important. You know, front end frameworks and front ends fit into a larger application picture. Most applications that users experience are supported by an application layer, commonly referred to as the back end, which is responsible for implementing the business logic. And of course, a data layer, which is responsible for persisting data that most applications rely heavily on. So let's go back to the faux exemplary application I talked about at the beginning of my talk. I broached on this, and the key there was users should be able to go and make appointments, medical appointments. So if a user should be able to make a medical appointment, the system should know or should need to know what all the appointments are and whether or not a given time slot is taken. And even if not taken, it is available for the taking by a given user. The list of appointments is maintained in some data store, presumably a SQL database or maybe a non-SQL database. And the backend or the application layer is responsible for receiving the request for application or for an appointment, and is responsible for retrieving the data it needs and performing the business logic, execution of business logic it needs in order to be able to return to the front end user whether or not an appointment is available, or more specifically, in the better implementation of the application, what appointments are available to the given user, if any. In fact, I would argue that the front end shouldn't care where the business logic is implemented and what the underlying appointment or user data looks like. The front end should just say this user needs an appointment, or they would like an appointment at this time frame, and then be able to get data back about what is available and present that to the user for their selection. special care, and I'd just like to highlight this, should be given to architecturing applications that have a variety of front-end modalities in order to maximize performance and efficiency. What do I mean by that? An application should be able to be used by a mobile app and a desktop browser app. The nature of the data and the experience between the two modalities should be equally responsive and equally usable, performant. So that means because the amount of screen real estate, for example, is larger on a web app on the browser than the mobile app, then some amount of data may not be presentable to the mobile app or needs to be compressed in some way. But it's important for architects and for developers to keep these considerations in mind in order to maximize and improve their products and the development thereof. Before we dive into React and Angular and all the names we hear about often, let's talk about some of these really good or best of 2022 apps. And I just have some examples just based on pictures, because like they say, pictures worth 1,000 words. Here is an example of a BMW website. It's a web app. It allows users to review products and understand what models of cars are coming out and what their specific features are. And the way that BMW has decided to do that is through use of this autoplay of imagery that conveys a lot of information, both pictorially and select bullet points, a la bullet points, brief feature statements. And they're communicating what's so unique about their offerings and how they differ from what came before. They do this in an engaging autoplay sort of format. So this is the key here is simple and doesn't require a whole lot of engagement from the users themselves. Spotify, as many of us have probably seen and used, is another example of a well-designed web app. Here, it's also available as a mobile and a desktop application. Their focus is on user conversion, and so simplicity, bright colors, and very simple messaging are key. But Spotify delivers live streaming of music, so there is a lot to be. There is a lot underneath that doesn't meet the eye at first that's going on, and they have to be very performant with how they implement that. And web frameworks are the key for how they are able to achieve their service. The last one that I will talk about is Make My Trip, and it is a trip booking application, and it's well-recognized structure of inputting where you're going, from where are you going, or from where to where are you going, when are you going, what kind of a trip you'd like. It's compact, it's clean, there's a lot of contrast, and there are very few ways for the user to interact. So this app presents the user with a well-known format based on other apps on what they can do. Okay, so we've talked about what a front-end framework can do for us, what the challenges are when you're not using a front-end framework or before they were available. We talked about where the front-end fits in the scheme of things, in the overall application architecture. We talked about some useful or exemplar web apps that are regarded as some of the best based on design or functionality. And now we are ready to talk about choosing a front-end framework. We didn't even talk about which ones there are, but rather how to choose. One of the most important factors in deciding which front-end framework to use is the type of application you want to develop and what your development team's skills are like. The most popular front-end frameworks for large-scale applications are Vue, React, Angular, and then for smaller applications are jQuery and Backbone.js. With the growing popularity of the digital world, more and more developers are emerging each passing day. And people today believe in learning skills that are easy to learn and can help them earn a good living. Therefore, newly emerging front-end frameworks and developers prefer learning the frameworks that are easy to learn for them and have the required features to cover a wide variety of apps. For example, React and Vue and Backbone are some of the simplest and easiest frameworks to learn, whereas Angular is considered a lot more complex. Now, there is the front-end framework for or preferences for developers based on skills and ability to learn and ease of learning. But then there is the right framework for an app. It depends on the type of app, the adaptability and the cost effectiveness of implementing it. So selecting the right framework can depend on those factors that I just outlined and the type of app that you need to develop and have the developers to build. A large scale versus small scale will need different features, and it will require a different selection process. The development team makeup also contributes to this, regardless of whether or not it's right for the team. If you don't have the skills, then you might have to use a complex framework such as Angular to do a simple job, but more typically it will go the other way around, and more simple frameworks will be used to stretch development teams to complex frameworks. It's worth noting, of course, that most developers need to work with several projects simultaneously, and hence they need to use simple frameworks. Developers prefer such frameworks over complex ones to stay ahead of the competition, render better output in terms of time and delivery time to their clients. And easy adaptability allows for quick learning and better results. Developers, like I said, prefer working with the latest front-end frameworks to keep up with what is coming out, and that becomes, and they feel that they can be more cost effective. Okay, let's dive in. So here we see most used frameworks. The data is a little stale, but I liked all the colors, so we'll go with this, and it hasn't changed all that much. Considering how easy it is to learn React.js, it could easily steal the number one spot for the best front-end framework. As you can see, jQuery is a close second, and Angular and Express are pretty much tied as well. Here in the remainder of this talk, I'm going to overview React, jQuery, Angular, Vue.js, and Svelte, just to touch on some others that we won't go into any great detail, but just say that they're worth looking in. And those are a little bit harder to learn, so that's some of the reason that one of the reasons I chose to focus on the ones that I'm stating. Okay, so if we look at React, its popularity is not surprising considering how easy it is to learn. It's now open source. It was originally developed by Facebook to address their growing technical challenges. Facebook needed constant additions and improvements to their source code base, and had a lot of demand on the presentation and the tools that they needed to underline their application. And it made development without a framework or formalized framework hard to fix and maintain their application. So React allowed them to make changes to code quickly and easily. They focused on components and approaches that were unique to their offering. It just so happened that over time, a lot of the applications have had the same requirements. The unique thing about React is that they have a virtual document object model, or DOM, with exceptional functionality. Some random statistics, or I guess key things to take away about React, is it uses JavaScript, JSX, which is HTML, JavaScript, and JavaScript syntax. There are 172,000 stars and 34,000 forks on GitHub for React. It's used by 1.2 million websites and has 422,000 domains. Okay, so the advantages, and we can extol this, is just easy to learn. it allows you to very quickly build components and build on top of components. So you build base components and then you combine them into unique, sort of like if you think about Legos, you take two small little Legos and then you can build a bigger piece with the small Legos and so on and so forth. And that's how kind of the functionality that React provides. And you can reuse the components you create across your whole code base. It makes it easier for you to collaborate with other developers, and your styling and your code is inherently uniform. The use of virtual DOM allows you seamless performance and ensures that even high-load applications have fast rendering. And that's what I think that Facebook was really trying to achieve, right? You have all those feed, all that data that the feed needs to be able to pull down and present to the user, and that's exactly what they've achieved. So this was a custom need that they had to develop. It allows for increased productivity, and maintenance is widely maintained. There's a lot of documentation, and it's very easy as a developer to insert yourself into a React application and be able to contribute quite quickly. Moreover, in addition to just being able to provide developers with a framework to use and a whole bunch of out-of-the-box libraries, it comes with a React Developer Tools, which is a browser extension that allows developers to make detailed observations as to what's going on in the components and how the styling of the components affects other components and which one is being presented and rendered. So it's really good for debugging. And of course, debugging is one of those things that separates good developers from great developers. But again, as good as React is, it is great for certain applications, and it does come with its own set of disadvantages, which may be big or small, depending on your specific need. Initially, and depending on what other programming languages and frameworks you know, initial phases of learning React can be a little challenging, especially because it takes a little bit of time for developers to understand the concepts and the syntax of JSX. JSX can remind you of a template language, but it comes with the full power of JavaScript. It's sort of like a mishmash of JavaScript and HTML. It's hard to get used to that, especially if you're not, if you haven't done it before. JSX produces React elements, and we will explore rendering them into the DOM in the next section here. So you will see what I mean. Let's take a look. So here we have, for example, a class-based component. So you have a shopping list, and as you can see over here, the React component is an out-of-the-box component. So everything can extend from this component, comes with a whole bunch of functionality. And right in here, we're writing inside this code, this snippet for a component, we're writing straight out HTML for what it should contain and how it should be presented. So we're saying there should be a div with a high level, like a label and a list of things. So it is a little bit like a mishmash of code, and it takes a little bit of time if you've never seen it to process it. I also want to point out that inside the HTML, you can refer back to variables and properties that are maintained in the component, such as they're doing it with the name of the shopping list. So that was React, and as we know, for the most part, fairly easy to learn. Angular is one of many frameworks based on TypeScript, but it takes a top spot. It was initially released in 2010 by Google as AngularJS, and now it's known, the current version, which is 2.0, it's known as Angular 2, and it was deployed in 2016, keeping in mind the need for improved technology and to overcome hurdles in other conventional frameworks. It's open source, just like React.js, and it's used to develop interfaces on the front end, just like React. The Angular framework relies on TypeScript, which is a scripting language, or it's just sort of a scripting language used to define different portions of the components and models. There are 74.7 thousand stars and over 19,000 forks on GitHub for Angular. It's used by 388 websites and has and is used on 198,000 unique domains. The advantages of Angular is the built-in functionality of real-time model view synchronization. It makes it easier to make changes and to see how they are impacted in your application. They have what are called directives that allow developers to play around with the objects in the DOM and create rich content in HTML. There is also dependency injections, which allow for developers to decouple interdependent components of code and reuse them wherever they need. And what that means is you can have different services, and you can say here in this component, this service is going to be used, and then in this other component, it's this service and another service. And so it's a very customizable plug and play sort of a framework. Angular gained popularity among developers steadily since it was launched. And today there's a huge community on the web of web developers who use and love Angular, and they are readily available to offer advice and answer questions and sort of solve different challenges and riddles. I've used them myself. Angular has better features compared to React, but it's not as easy to learn. And this is one of those things that as a developer, given your skills, your time to learn new things, and also the client needs, it may be a hard choice. The framework is a little bit complex and takes time to excel. So there's learning, but then there's mastering it. It also has a two-way binding feature, and it's a very good, provides a very good way of understanding and sort of taking hold of the model and view controller outlook. So who uses Angular? Some of the bigger names are Forbes, BMW, even Microsoft. It's pretty powerful and very strong, and I suggest that everybody play around at least with a very basic setup for Angular and go through a tutorial just to understand how it differs from React. Okay, so I already touched on that. Angular is used by BMW, by Forbes, by Gmail, Upwork, Microsoft, React. Well-known applications that use React, of course, are Instagram because it's owned by Facebook. Facebook, Skype, Walmart, and Tesla are primarily React apps. So those were the two heavy hitters. You can be used for large projects, performant. Sometimes you need something that's a little bit smaller, lighter, easier to learn. Let's look at Vue. The developers of Vue.js have combined the existing front-end framework's best features for a small and simple and straightforward framework. It's not complex like Angular. It makes it easy to learn and easy to use. It's much smaller and similar to Angular in a similar way, offers two-way binding, virtual DOM, and the component-based programming approach. It's a framework that allows you to build both dynamic and small web applications with ease. However, despite being versatile, it's not yet as popular as these other big scale companies. And it hasn't gained as much traction and trust as Angular and other sort of more enterprise frameworks. That being said, it has 186,000 stars and 29,000 forks on GitHub, which I personally found to be a little bit surprising. It's used by 280,000 websites and maintains 174,000 unique domains, which was more than I would have imagined. Up until a while ago, most of the documentation was in, I believe, in Chinese, and was hard for many developers to come together, just because most developers are expecting documentation, the community to have access to English literature and content. Some of the companies that use Vue are Alibaba, 9gag, and others like that. And believe it or not, GitHub uses Vue, which I actually didn't know myself until I started doing this talk. So as you can see here in this snippet of code, Vue is pretty simple. You have the combination of both scripts and templates and styling all in one. And these are called what they call .vue files. It's a special file format that allows developers to encapsulate the template, logic, and styling of Vue component in a single file. And as you can see, the single file are a natural extension or combination, more specifically, of HTML, of CSS, and JavaScript. Everything is in that one file, concise. You can see exactly what it does, what it's going to look like, and how it's styled, or what its structure is and how it's styled. Each file, each file is composed of the script and the template, but with that, there are some advantages and some disadvantages to this approach. There is tightly coupled, it's fairly tightly coupled, and you're collating the concerns and component use. So that means you're probably not going to be able to reuse a bunch of this in other portions of your application. With that in mind, knowing that there's so many features that are available in Vue, it's just not as successful in creating stable components. If you're looking for a community that has overcome that separation of concerns, Vue is probably not for you, although it is a otherwise pretty powerful tool depending on the kind of need you may have. Lastly, there's Svelte. It's kind of a framework without a framework. Svelte is a relative newcomer to the world of front-end framework development. Its popularity, though, despite its newcomer status, is pretty tremendous. It's had an incredible trajectory in growth in the last couple of years. It is a compile time web UI framework, and it requires less coding and has no virtual DOM. You can just make direct and specific changes to the real DOM and compile it, but that also means it is performant. It's typically suited to create small size apps with fast performance and interactive experience. It's fast because it's, again, compiled and not having to be interpreted. It can be used to make separate components for existing apps. Some of the pros are its syntax is fairly easy to read and understand. It is very reactive. It's very small. There's a small learning curve, and it's it's pretty compact. But unlike React and Angular, it's not backed by any large company such as Google or Facebook. It has limited tools and packages, and although it's popular, the community that would typically offer support to developers is just not in the same place as it is for React and Angular. Actually, not last or least, jQuery. We've all heard about it, I'm sure, and it's been around for quite some time. It was developed originally in 2006 and it's been around for a while. It's older than most other frameworks, but still very popular and widely used. It's very simple and it's easy to learn, and it's powerful in that it allows the user or the developer access to the bare bones. And you don't need to write a whole lot of extensive Java code or know a lot of packages. The good thing is it's still used and it's still developed into a better version of itself with each day. There's a lot of community support. There is now a jQuery mobile, and one can easily develop mobile applications as well, which is great because if you think, a lot of the applications that people write are both should be available on desktop as a browser app, but also on mobile. It's very simple to learn. There's very little programming language additions that one has to learn besides knowing some JavaScript. It's still considered one of the best and most popular front-end frameworks for 2022. It's simple and it's very easy to deploy. And makes for very simple HTTP requests, which is where Ajax falls into. But then again, it's older, and there are many new and better frameworks. And what I mean by that is more powerful frameworks that obfuscate a lot of the nitty-gritty that users often have to, or not users, developers often have to learn. It allows for the development of dynamic applications, but at a slower rate, and its lightweight interface can lead to problems in the long run. And what I mean by that is it might be easy to learn and you can get the job done quickly, but eventually, depending on how much your application grows, there might be features and functionality that you are asked to develop down the line that may be very difficult, not impossible, but very difficult to do in jQuery. I'm sorry, I'm reading some questions. Let me actually, if it's okay, finish the talk and then I will get back to your question. Okay, etc. Meaning there are others. This was just a select few of tens or dozens of these frameworks. Some others that I wanted to highlight are Ember.js, Backbone.js, and Alpine.js. Ember.js is a component-based functionality using two-way data binding. It resembles Angular a lot, developed in 2011, and is one of the toughest frameworks to learn. It's used by some large companies, including LinkedIn and Apple. Its strength is in that it provides the ability for developers to develop complex mobile and web applications in tandem for the same, like the mobile functionality and views in tandem. Backbone.js is open source, free to use, developed in 2010 by Jeremy Ashkenaz. It's popular and most used framework for creating small single page web apps. It keeps the app logic and the UI fairly separate, making it easy for developers to sort of read the code and understand what's going on. And Alpine.js is also one of those fairly popular, on the rise frameworks that is easy to use and is good for small application development. Okay, so the key takeaways here are: what are the front-end frameworks and why are we concerned about them? Why should they be used? There are CSS frameworks and packages that have pre-written code and libraries that offer out-of-the-box functionality for developers and standardized code and folders and files. They offer a base on development, and they allow the flexibility of transitioning from one project to another and having that structure. When should you use a front-end framework? A front-end framework offers you an assurance that you're building an application that's compliant, that's well structured, upgradable, and maintainable. And for most developers who work for customers with ever-evolving needs, this is absolutely key. Maintenance and structure. The choice of front-end framework essentially varies according to the business goal, the target audience, desired website or application design. And thus, developers should keep a close check on the developments in this segment. Choosing the proper framework should mean making the first correct move toward future goals. So we've discussed some of the best front-end frameworks available. Front-end frameworks are ever evolving. And new technology is always around the corner. That's one of the challenges for developers, is to learn what's available and know what's coming down the road so that you stay competitive and are able to use the latest technologies that are available. And I guess that's it. Thank you, and I will take questions.